Hello, welcome to the season 2 Aftershow. I'm your host, Nomfanelo Malloy. So, before I dive into season 2, I just want to share that by the time this episode airs, which will be September 19th, it will be the podcast's 1 year anniversary. Technically, the 1 year anniversary is September 20th, which was when, a year ago, the first episode came out, which was on Drive. Still fantastic movies. And speaking of Drive, it is celebrating its 11th anniversary. So if you guys have not, please check out the film and also the podcast episode. Now, what I like about Rediscovered Movies, the podcast, is that it feels like a podcast. Let me just scratch that. So, for those of you that are not familiar, that's a reference to that viral clip of Harry Styles in an interview for Don't Worry Darling, where he says that whole notion that what he likes about the movie is that it feels like a movie, all that sort of jazz. So let's go back. Anyways, what I really love about the podcast is I love to watch the films, especially the films that are underappreciated for a variety of reasons. And basically, I love to share those with you to bring more awareness to those movies that may or may not be deserved. It's a subjective opinion. But regardless, check it out for yourself and then decide whether it's worth your time or not. And even though there is downsides with the podcast, because I am a one-person show where not only I do the recording, but I basically do the editing, producing, marketing, all that sorts of deal. Which, yes, like there is a positive side to it in terms of me controlling the content, but it's a lot of work at the end of the day. But still love it. So pretty much with the goal for this podcast is to make movies great again, especially during we're in an age of streaming dominating content. So, and you guys could obviously tell that with TV tends to be more talked about and is considered to be in its golden age of TV. And it kind of brings me to this point where if you guys saw recently, there was a viral clip of Matt Damon when he was on Hot Ones, which the interview with that came out a year ago. And I don't know why this clip became viral on because I saw it on Twitter. But anyways, it brought up fascinating conversations. So the short of it is that with this clip, he talks about the current state of movies, how essentially back in the 90s, when a movie doesn't do well at the box office, it has a second chance of recuperating money through physical media. And then fast forward to decades later, when physical media is still present, but it's on the decline, and when streaming is put on more on the forefront, it really gives those movies that haven't done well at the box office less of a chance, which in a way signals to studios that, people don't want to see those movies anymore. So I would say for me, he's spot on with those comments. So check out that interview on Hot Ones, which is on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description. I might even do a video on this topic because I have a lot of thoughts on it. It might be on my YouTube channel. We'll have to wait and see. But it's definitely worth talking about. So I just want to say there are good films out there. Even though it may not look like it currently, it's just you have to find them. I mean, for instance, RRR. I haven't seen the movie yet. It's on my watch list. Yeah, people seem to love that movie because I wonder if that movie came out in the theaters today, would it have been successful or would it have flopped? I don't know. I love to hope that it becomes successful, but honestly, these days you just never know. I mean, look with the movies that came out during the summer. Because with Lightyear, for example, people predicted that that movie was going to be a success at the box office. But when it came out, it failed expectations. Interesting. And on the opposite end with Elvis, people, I guess, were uncertain if that was going to do well at the box office or not. And it turned out it was a big hit. So honestly, anything can happen these days, but it is what it is. So, anyways, back to topic. So, with this podcast, I just want to share that there are some good gems out there. You guys just have to look for it. And hopefully with the films that I talk about, they're worthwhile for your viewing pleasure. So back to season 2. So this season was certainly, I would say, similar, but different. It was more experimental, not in terms of like the format, but in terms of how it was laid out for you. So notable difference is that I recorded not only the audio versions of the episodes, but I also did a video portion of it too. I used Zoom, which has its ups and downs, because I had to use those for both when I did episodes with guests and also when I did episodes by myself. So some of the episodes I would say went smoothly, while others had some issues with lagging, which hopefully wasn't too distracting. So I'm not sure if I'll use Zoom for the future, but I definitely want to continue to have video options. And yeah, also too, there were more episodes because first season had 10. I decided to double it with 20. And because always there's a long list of movies that I want to talk about and I still want to talk about. So I figure more episodes is great, even though it puts a bit more stress on my end in terms of putting it out there, but I certainly enjoy it. So I'll most likely keep with the 20 episode format. I might even add more. We'll have to wait and see. But certainly enjoy it. And if you guys follow the podcast on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, I posted short previews videos, can't even speak today, of the episodes because I wanted to incorporate visual component. So most of the episodes have videos, while there's a few that don't, just out of respect of the guest. And yeah, like I figure you guys would want to see my lovely face, or also too the guests that I have featured on the podcast. And also too, this season I made it my goal, at least one of my main goals, to improve the audio since it is an audio podcast. I'd say for the most part it has improved since compared to season 1. There is still background noise which I can't control because again I live in an apartment and there's always noise around me. I try to do the best that I can that I cannot control, but hopefully it wasn't too distracting for you. And also too, I promoted a lot of Spotify this season with the discussion questions that you guys could still answer. And because of those, like I want to start like conversations. Mostly like the questions would deal with either some theories I have with the movies or any ones that will provide different takes, so forth. So, yeah, hopefully, with those, we could just have like a community where, we could talk about the movies. I might add a poll option because with Spotify, you could not only add a question, but you could also add a poll. So I may not do that for all the episodes, but we'll see. All right, let's have some fun. Now I will share a montage of some of the moments from season 2. Enjoy.
It's definitely something you'd want to watch around Christmas. Therefore, I guess you associate it with it.
Yeah.
So, I could see it being a Christmas movie.
Because honestly, like, I never thought about it, like, as a Christmas movie until, like, after I watched this movie recently. Because, like, when people mention, like, favorite Christmas movies, like, this one would not be, like, at the top of the list because it's not, like, the traditional Christmas film. But obviously, this one is set during, like, Christmas time. And it's really about, people, like, coming together, like, and all that stuff. So,
and then the snow, everything kind of makes it feel Christmassy, too.
Absolutely. So, like, if Die Hard can be a Christmas film, then this one can be a Christmas film.
Absolutely.
Well. Yeah. During the time, like, I loved watching romantic comedies. Like, I still do today, but I haven't watched it as much as I did back then because with romantic comedies, it has, like, a nice, like, charm to it. It obviously follows certain beats, but you still get a kick at it at the end of the day because of the chemistry, like, with the cast and the storyline too, perhaps, and all that jazz.
Yeah, and it also showed. It was like she said, "I want to break up. I don't want to see you again. Go back to the factory." Where does he go? To the fucking tennis table somewhere in the middle of nowhere. That was, yeah. He has desire. He became human in some way, and I feel like that's also why Alma go and see him again at the end, and why it's so open, because if it still goes like that, maybe she could change her mind. Maybe she would see him really as human, and he could be human in some way.
I kind of developed, like, a crush on Dan Stevens because he's good looking, still is today, and I honestly didn't know much about him, like, as an actor. Like, I didn't even know, like, about him in Downton Abbey, which that's what he's prominently known for. And I was kind of surprised that, like, he's British, again, because I didn't know him.
What Dave did was kind of tell them, like, this is what's popping right now. This is what's famous, and this is what's going to make you reach the top. And I think he just went with what the audience or what the public wanted at that time, especially if they were going to go to America and Vietnam and perform for Black folk. They should give them what they would like. And imagine them singing country music going to Vietnam. I would have, like, the show wouldn't have even ended. They probably would have been booed off the stage.
It seemed like the filmmakers, I guess, took inspiration probably, like, from those creatures to come up with the look for the aliens. So it was nice to see that the aliens here did not look like the typical aliens that you would see, like, in films such as Independence Day or the Alien movies and so forth. So good on them. I don't understand why her voice is dubbed, because clearly, like, with Gina Carano's voice, like, she speaks English and all that stuff. So I didn't pick up on it, like, when I first saw this movie, because honestly, like, I didn't know Gina Carano. I didn't know who she is. But then when I saw multiple viewings and when I saw, like, her in interviews, I was, like, confused because she sounds completely different than she does in this movie. So I don't know, like, if it's the director's choice or if the studio made it, but I felt, that was very off with that choice. So it's kind of, like, debatable whether, like, it leans too heavily on Beverly Hills Cop, but for me, like, I see the influence, but I wouldn't say it's completely a rip-off of Beverly Hills Cop. He reminds me like of that moment in the TV show Arthur, when Arthur is getting visibly upset at DW for being annoying because you see the shot of him clenching his fist like he wants to beat her up. That's what kind of like came into my mind when Ilya like wants to like beat up someone because he gets triggered. General Decker is essentially the only character that wants to destroy them, or as he would say, annihilate them. He often says it repeatedly, and no one wants to listen to him until like the Martians get more threatening later in the film. I would certainly not attend that dojo for a couple reasons. Like, also too, like that dojo has a crematorium in the back office, which makes you think like, you know, like did they kill off competition, or like those that try to threaten the dojo? It's like clearly some like shady stuff is happening in that dojo, so yeah, I would never want to attend there.
I do have to say, the cutting scene with the vegetables, that's not how you cut a pepper.
Yeah.
That is absolutely not how you cut a pepper. I will argue on that.
Yeah. But I mean, that's how she does it, so...
That's what chefs do, I guess.
Exactly. You know, whatever works, I suppose.
This humor is almost like poetry. You know, poetry you've got a very small window to tell your story, you know? And poetry also, a good poetry is not explicit, you know, it's very subtle, uses metaphors and stuff like that. It uses indirect language to tell the story. So I find the comedy is also a bit poetic in that way, and Robert Townsend has done an extremely good job in that regard.
When I first like saw it, I just wondered, like, it does look like a painting in ways because it's enhanced, but I would probably guess it's like the filter that they use, because I'm not sure what cameras they use. I'm gonna guess digital, and yeah, like it just looks.
It's also very thought-provoking as well, like the philosophy theories included in the movie makes you think a lot. And yeah, I thought it was really interesting. There's a lot of hints of philosophy in the movie, and at times you don't know who the antagonist is, you don't know who the protagonist is, like you don't know which side to choose when it comes to this movie, because it makes you shift your point of view a lot.
Usually, like for the podcast, like I would watch the film twice, and this time, honestly, like I didn't felt like rewatching this movie. You see, today, like in modern movies, let's just take with action movies for example, they use lots of like quick cuts and like the fast-paced editing and all that stuff, I guess, to make it more intense for the viewer, but at the same time it's hard to tell what is going on in the scene. The Bourne films are examples of doing that movement. So with this film, I liked how it wasn't too flashy. You could tell like what they're doing with the moves. It's very clear. But yeah, like with dance films of today, I'm sure there are exceptions, they tend to be too flashy with cinematography. It's nice to see like older actors get to play those roles, because usually they would either be like put off like to the side, most likely in like authoritative roles, either as like the boss or the handler or so forth. But yeah, it was just fun to see that, hey, like older people can do action stuff as well.
You know what it reminds me of, actually, now that I'm thinking about it? When I used to go and hang out at a comic book shop. That's what it reminds me of. I think that's that nostalgia I used to have. like as a 15-year-old,
Yeah.
hanging out at a comic book shop, talking to these
Mhm.
18-year-olds. Like, I don't know what I was doing with my life. Hey, but all I'm gonna say is I got some discounts, so I'm okay. But it
Oh yeah, for sure.
you know, but it gives that movie kind of gives that vibe off, but like older.
At the end of the day, like what you want to like, read what you want to read, and so forth. So it wouldn't make you like more or lesser than what you are. Re-listening to those clips has brought back some memories. Some were fun, others not so much. Even though I usually make notes on what to say in general, sometimes the unexpected just comes out, especially when I have a guest, because you never know on what they'll say and you just have to go along for the ride. But regardless, I had fun recording those episodes. Now that you've heard some moments from the podcast, I will now do breakdown for season 2. Now, before I start, I just want to apologize in advance for the background noise. Usually I record either in the morning or whenever it's most quiet at my place, but I had to do it in the afternoon/evening because of availability. So, regardless, please enjoy. Beach Street. Beach Street is a film that I appreciated before the podcast and certainly after. Mainly because I love the grassroots approach that the filmmakers did to make the film authentic for its time, like with the use of real life dancers and with the music choices and really representing hip hop during the 80s. It certainly has one of my favorite soundtracks, even though it's hard to find the full soundtrack on streaming, but I was able to find it on YouTube and I've been listening to it since I did the podcast episode with Jasmine. So I wanted to do this episode with Jasmine because she's a dancer and I wanted to get her perspective with the movie from her point of view. But it was very interesting that she said that she doesn't watch a lot of dancing movies, which I would get to, because probably like if I were a dancer, I'd probably wouldn't watch a lot of those movies because you have more insight into how those things go than with the average audience member. So I kind of get that. So it was interesting that while I was watching the movie in prep for the episode, there was a debate I had with my brother in terms of the scene with Kenny and Mel's performance during the final sequence of the film. So I thought, like, with those two characters, they had different voices, but my brother thought they were the same, which is hilarious. But when you listen to that track, I guess, in the soundtrack, it's definitely Mel. But with the film, at least to my knowledge, that they used Kenny's voice and Mel's voice for that performance. And in terms of the whole Beat Street versus Break-In, I would lean towards Beat Street overall because, at least for me, it has like the better story. But I would say Break-In, it's fun too in its own right, because with Break-In, that's more about the dancing. So I would say on that aspect, Breaking overpowers that. But with Beat Street, it's more about the music and the hip hop culture, especially in New York during the 80s. And obviously, those two movies have different tones. While Breakin' is more of a comedy, you could argue unintentional comedy, while with Beach Read is more serious, question mark, or at least it tries to. And on a final note, I will add, eat your eggs before I break your legs. Fast forward. Fast forward. It's interesting that I guess with certain movies, when you watch it at a young age, you enjoy it. But then when you grow up and watch it years later, you probably have mixed feelings towards it. And that's essentially my experience with this movie. Because, as what many people would point out, the dance sequences are essentially the highlights of this movie. But everything else is a mess. Because, honestly, like, I don't get, like, with the main group of characters, the Adventurous Eight, are they supposed to be dancers? Or are they supposed to be singers? Because I feel like with this movie, they're supposed to be dancers because they practice the dancing more than the singing. Because with the singing, they do it during their performances, which does not make sense because when you do all that choreography, you're going to be very out of breath, unless if you're a professional and you could be able to do both. But I don't get why they did both singing and dancing with this movie. But anyways, so this movie honestly could have been better if they gave the supporting characters, mainly the women in the Adventurous Eight, more, I would say, personality or backstory than just focusing them as just average people trying to make it big in New York City. And for those of you that have seen the social media promos for this movie, I'm not sure if you could tell, but I wore a Michael Jackson t-shirt. And the reason why I wore that while I was recording this episode is because in the movie, there was a Michael Jackson poster featured amongst many in the main character's apartment. So I figured, yeah, Michael Jackson was best sitting because he, of course, is one of the big artists at the time and also the staple for being both a vocalist and a dancer, which probably is the group's one of their main inspirations. The Sapphires. After watching this movie for the podcast, I was surprised to learn that it was very successful in Australia, which is where the movie is based in and where they did the production for this movie. So essentially, the film is based on a play, which is based on the true story. I felt like the film was predictable in terms of its story, but I would say that the music is enjoyable, even though they were cover songs, essentially. I felt like the music should have been either original or revamp the classic songs to make it feel fresh. And speaking of the music, I did listen to the soundtrack afterwards, which I enjoyed. Even though, like I said, their covers is fun to listen to, depending on my mood. And I would say Chris O'Dowd, he's the standout performance, because it was certainly different from what he did with Bridesmaids, which a lot of people, I guess, became familiar with him. And even though there were some issues with his character, he was still a delight to watch on screen. And I did this episode with Hodan, like the first of two. And yeah, like she was certainly fun to have. I definitely enjoyed her takes on the movie. And I felt like, though, even though this movie is based on a real life story, there should be a documentary or at least a docu-series that covers the real life aspects of the film. High Fidelity. I had to re-record this episode, well, at least the beginning portion of the episode, because I had computer issues. So I had to use my smartphone to record. I used a different mic, which is why my sound is different. So that's why with Shadow, like she mentioned in the intro, oh, this one's better than the last one. So that's in reference to having to start over with recording of this episode. So speaking of Shadow, like she's great to have like conversations with, because we attended this same program with the scriptwriting program at Algonquin, and we became friends, and she's always fun to like hang out with, and always love to do projects that she asked me to be a part of. And when it came to High Fidelity, I felt like she was the perfect choice to do as a guest for this episode. This film really made me miss record stores such as HMV, just because during the time, like with the 90s, 2000s, record stores were a fun place to hang out, to check out new stuff, like with the music, the movies, and so forth. Even though we still have record stores today, at least here in Canada, we have Sunrise Records. It's just not the same feeling, but it is what it is. And I still haven't seen the TV series version with Zoe Kravitz. I hear it's good, and I heard that many people were disappointed with the cancellation. So it's definitely on my watch list, even though I've been busy, but I'll try to watch it when possible. Morning Glory. After this episode aired, I was surprised to see that there was a lot of interest in this movie. But it shows that I guess there's an audience out there that appreciates this movie. So thank you for checking out that episode. So with Morning Glory, it's not the traditional romantic comedy, because it really focuses more on Rachel McAdams' character trying to be a successful producer for a morning talk show. And even though, like, yeah, you have that subplot with her and Patrick Wilson, so I would say that is the rom-com aspect, but this movie is not fully a rom-com. I view it more like as a comedy with some dramatic elements, but as a comedy. And this really was an interesting film for Bad Robot under their umbrella, because usually with Bad Robot, they focus on a lot of sci-fi action or a lot of the genre projects. But I guess in a way, with J.J. Abrams, he wanted to produce something that would cater to fans of Felicity. And it probably did. It was unfortunate that this movie didn't do well when it came out at the time, but at least people seem to enjoy this movie. And it's interesting that this movie, it had memes without even though this was before memes became a thing. So with the scenes of Ernie the Weatherman doing the ridiculous stuff for the sake of the show, it's interesting that today those will be meme-worthy moments. And while I was recording this episode, I decided to wear like a blazer to really fit the mood and to get into the mindset as an anchor. And I felt that helped while I was recording that episode. And yeah, I would love to see more movies in this genre. It'll be interesting to see a movie in terms of how journalism is today compared to when Morning Glory was released at the time. I'm your man. When I was compiling a list of movies to cover for this season, I'm Your Man was certainly one of the first choices. Because when I first saw this movie at TIFF, I fell in love with this movie because I loved how it combined sci-fi and romance and comedy into one. So in a way, it refreshed the rom-com genre while also to trying to talk about how, robots can be humans without nailing it in the head than with a lot of movies or sci-fi movies that will really focus on that theme. And Corinne, yeah, I did this episode with Corinne. She was great. Loved her takes on this movie. And yeah, certainly I loved the movie when I first saw it. I still love it today. Definitely underrated. So for those of you that haven't seen it, please check it out. And I do want to mention that when I watched this movie at home with my family, my brother kept making the joke that with Dan Stevens is Robo-Simp, which is hilarious. I disagree with him because because he's programmed to love the main character. But my brother didn't see it that way. So it is what it is. I Am Mother. With this movie, I definitely enjoyed the craftsmanship of it in terms of the technical aspects that they use. Because I love with sci-fi movies that look expensive but are actually relatively low budget. That is an A+ on my mind. So I first learned about the film when I saw a VFX episode on Corridor Crew with their channel on YouTube. They had the filmmaker. He talked about how they were able to do the scenes with Mother, which is fascinating. So I recommend you guys check out that episode. So back to the movie. So I did the episode with Hodan, and she, I would say, enjoyed the movie more than I did. I appreciated the film for what it is, but for me, I'm not sure if it has that rewatchability as a whole. But I will certainly watch certain scenes. But it's just for me, it's probably one of those films where you would have to be in a certain mood to enjoy it. But I certainly appreciated all the hard work that the cast and crew did with this movie. And it was another episode where I had to use my smartphone to record, which is why my voice sounds different. But hey, you gotta do what you gotta do to get the work done. Prospect. This film was certainly one of my first choices to cover for this season of the podcast. I would say, the visuals. They're stunning, fantastic. I don't know if they used a filter from their cameras or if it's with the production design, but it really looks like art that comes to life. They look like paintings, but are moving paintings. However, the filmmakers did it, I would say great job with that one. Pedro Pascal, he is fantastic in this movie as an untrustworthy character, and he seems to be having fun playing both sides in this movie. And it makes me wonder if he got chosen to do The Mandalorian because of this movie, because he pretty much wears a costume for the most part in this movie from head to toe. Maybe, I don't know, but it's possible. Evolution. This movie is definitely representative for its time in terms of the humor, which could either make or break the movie for you depending on your style of humor. But really, this was a fun sci-fi film. In ways, tries to emulate films such as Men in Black and Ghostbusters. Well, I guess no surprise because you had the director of Ghostbusters, Ivan Reitman, did this movie. So, loved how it's hilarious that Head and Shoulders saved the day in terms of defeating the creatures. I mean, that probably won't go down in real life, but it came in handy, definitely. And loved the creatures in this movie, especially with that bulldog creature because it looks so adorable. But then once it launches the attack, it's very life-threatening. Mars attacks. Oh, every time when those Martians speak like that, it's just hilarious. They remind me of barking dogs or ducks, but hilarious. Yeah, this movie makes me just miss ensemble disaster movies because this movie is either a satire or a parody of those movies. I think in particular from the 50s and 60s, which was noted in the trivia section. So, but with this movie, it definitely tries to be more than a parody or a satire movie. And yeah, I was just disappointed to learn that it didn't do well at the box office. Maybe people just didn't understand it at the time. I don't know. But yeah, I would love to see more films done this way than just, the typical, action, gritty disaster film. We need more comedies up in here. Hollywood Shuffle. When I chose to do this movie for the podcast, I knew I had to do it with my dad because I think for one, because we saw the movie growing up with the VHS tape, and also too, I wanted to hear his takes on the film, and I would say we would both agree that this movie is certainly relevant back then and still is today. Even though things have changed, but for the most part, it's relevant. I enjoyed the parodies that it does, like with the like for instance with the Siskel and Ebert parodies, how they did the trailers with the Clint Eastwood one and the Indiana Jones one. So I loved how, even though this movie had a point that it was trying to come across, it's certainly enjoyable to watch as a satire. Undercover Brother. I wasn't sure how I would have responded to this movie watching it in today's lens, but I'm just glad that I still enjoy this movie today as I did when I first saw it in theaters back in 2002. Because I love how this movie pokes fun of not just of Caucasian stereotypes, but with Black or African American stereotypes as well too. Because I feel like with comedy these days, it's kind of missing that self-awareness to it. I mean, there's probably exceptions, but for the most part, like comedies are just not the way they are back then for, I would say, for obvious reasons. But we need to poke fun of each other every now and then as long as it's done tastefully and it has good intentions to it. And interesting that, so I decided, like, when I was promoting the podcast, I decided to share the song that Snoop Dogg and Bootsy Collins did, which is their version of Give Up the Funk. And so I clipped a portion of the video. I decided to share it on my Twitter, which I usually don't share much of my Music Monday choices on Twitter. I usually do it on Instagram. So I also do it on Instagram. But on Twitter, I decided to share the song, and I saw that Bootsy Collins, he liked the post, which made my day. So love that. And also too has a great soundtrack with this movie. The Art of Self-Defense. If that dojo existed today and was run the way it was in the movie, that karate would have went out of business. Yeah, this movie, I liked how it was a different martial arts movie compared to the ones that I've seen before. And yeah, the comedy I'd say works and is interesting with its commentary on masculinity versus femininity. And yeah, while watching this movie for the podcast, it kind of made me want to go back to karate. I mean, I don't know if I'll actually do that, but it's something that I'm definitely reconsidering. And the soundtrack for this movie is not my favorite because with metal music in general, it does not click for me. But hey, if you enjoy it, good for you. Fatal Beauty. I had some reservations about doing this movie for the podcast, not because of the movie itself, but because of its star, Whoopi Goldberg. Because at the time that I was finalizing my list, there was some controversy that came out where on The View, she pretty much said that Holocaust wasn't about race and so forth, which I don't agree with. So after that went down, I took it out of the list. But then later on, like weeks later, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this movie because I enjoy the movie and I don't want like a person's, controversy to affect me talking about this movie. Anyways, back to this movie. This was a fun movie. It's not a bad movie than what critics claim to be, even though it's interesting that the director later on says that he regrets doing this movie. It's not a bad movie. I mean, it doesn't do anything new with its genre, but it's certainly a fun movie. I mean, yeah, like I would agree that the whole like her character, Whoopi's character being Italian, like I would say that I didn't mind it per se because if her character was Italian or not, it wouldn't make much of a difference. So that's what I'll say on that. And it's not a complete ripoff. Beverly Hills Cop, I I would get though if this movie was inspired by Beverly Hills Cop, but they're not the same movie because they're different tones and different situations. And another note, a final note, is that with some of the songs that were featured in this movie are hard to find on streaming platforms, I'm assuming because of copyright reasons. I don't know, but I was able to find them on YouTube, but outside of that, hard. Ricochet. This one is probably my least favorite episode, not just for the season, but the podcast overall. At the time that I was recording it, I was just dealing with some personal stuff at the time, which really kind of affected my viewings for this movie. So probably that's why this movie did not click for me. I don't know. But yeah, just watching that movie, it felt too graphic. Especially when Denzel Washington's character gets assaulted by a call girl. Anyways, so also too, I hated that I had to get the DVD for this movie because there was no streaming option in Canada, so that pissed me off for one. Also too, with the DVD, it was not remastered because it certainly looked like it was filmed during the 90s. And the widescreen for that DVD was terrible because it was anamorphic or cinemascope because the image itself was small while the bars pretty much covered the TV. So yeah, that also too dropped it down for me with this movie. So anyways, I guess depending on the mood, you could enjoy this movie, at least in parts. But honestly, if this was not for the lead actors, if they actually didn't delivered with their performance, I would have hated this movie even more. Maybe I'll dig the movie if I'm in a better mood, but for now, I didn't like it. The Guest. Now, The Guest is certainly one of my favorite episodes to record, mainly because I heavily enjoy this movie. Dan Stevens, holy moly, like he definitely transformed for this movie as David, in quotes. He is not only capable in the action scenes, but he is so charming. And also too, this also made me wonder, is David bionic? Because I need answers on that, because he seemed to be fine. Like he was like the Energy Bunny, even though he kept getting obstacles thrown at him, he still kept going and going. But when he gets shot in the leg, he has a limp though, which makes me wonder, is he superhuman? But he essentially is like the Terminator in this movie. But yeah, also too, loved the visuals, loved the performances, and the soundtrack too, even though it's not something I typically listen to. I appreciated that. And yeah, like if the sequel is happening, looking forward to that one. Hopefully when the sequel comes out, it's more accessible than how when the first movie came out in theaters, which I wasn't able to see until the DVD came out at the time. And this was before streaming. Haywire. I don't have too much to share with this episode, but I'll just say that with the movie, it's enjoyable as an action thriller. It's not the typical action movie that was perceived with the marketing. and which is, I would say, is a key factor on why certain movies fail at the box office. Anyways, so yeah, Gina Carano definitely did a good job. Love the direction from Steven Soderbergh. Love the score. And really, the main question I had was, why was Gina Carano's voice dubbed in this movie? Honestly, it did not make sense for her voice to be dubbed. The Long Kiss Goodnight. The Long Kiss Goodnight was certainly a film that was ahead of its time. It's a badass movie, and Gina Davis is a badass in this movie, and also to Samuel Jackson as well. And loved how this movie is very self-aware with its humor, and in ways it tries to be like a cheesy action film that stars like Stallone or Schwarzenegger would do, but also too, this movie tries to be serious as well too. And did this episode with Corinne. She's fantastic. And it was interesting, like, we had that argument about the scene with Charlie and Caitlin's capture. So if you remember with the scene, she tries to escape with Caitlin, but she's trapped in the basement that was full of gasoline. So anyways, so the doll that Perkins gave Caitlin had gasoline inside it. And so Corinne, I believe, said that Charlie put the gasoline inside the doll, which I disagree with because we didn't see her do any of that. Because it seemed like Charlie was surprised that maybe the doll had gasoline. Now, in terms of why the doll has gasoline inside, plot convenience, I suppose, because we knew that she had to escape that freezer section. And I guess with the doll, in a way, she gets the gasoline and able to light the place up and make her grand escape with Caitlin. So, yeah, it is what it is, I suppose, but does not make sense. Red. While I was doing research for this movie, I was surprised that the tone in the comics was more serious compared to the film, which was interesting because I was surprised in that respect that the film leaned towards the comedy, maybe to appeal to a more wider audience than how it was depicted in the comics. I'm not really sure. But regardless, Red is a fun action comedy movie. Way better than the second one. And like I said in the podcast, it's my favorite modern Bruce Willis performance, but also film as well too. And definitely, like, after watching Red, I want to see more older actors in this sorts of role. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. The Man from U.N.C.L.E. is certainly a fun spy film because I like how it tries to do a more classic spy approach in terms of setting it during the 60s. I would say during the height of spy genre, like with notably the James Bond movies as examples. And I liked how this movie is in a way like a buddy cop, or in this instance will be a buddy spy film with the chemistry with the main actors. And I could definitely see any of the actors in this movie to do spy films either as villains or as heroes. Either way. And the direction style with Guy Ritchie could either make or break your viewing habits, which for me I was kind of split on at times. But it's certainly an enjoyable movie to watch. And I haven't seen the TV series, so I don't know how it compares, but I imagine it's a good companion piece to it. And I wanted to note that this was pretty much the only episode where I had to re-record it from scratch. I think because when I recorded it the first time, the quality just kept lagging because I the first time I with this season I decided to record the episodes via Zoom because I wanted to do not just audio but also video as well too. And Zoom was the only option for me that I could do at the time since I don't have an external camera. But anyways, so when I recorded the first time, it kept lagging, so I had to redo it later in the day because I wore a different outfit and stuff. So I hopefully the episode was enjoyable for you to listen to. One of the goals for this season was to feature guests, and I say I accomplished that. I had a great time with each of them that were featured, and for sure I would definitely invite them back for future episodes. And I want to give a special shout out to the guests, which include Corinne, Hodan, Shadow, Jasmine, and my dad. I want to say thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come hang out with me virtually to talk about movies. Now, I asked the guests to share their thoughts on either their episodes, the podcast in general, or film suggestions, and here's what they have to say. All right, first off, we have Hodan. Here's what she has to say. I thoroughly enjoyed being a guest on your show twice now. You have introduced me to movies I wouldn't have normally watched, and it was truly interesting. Regarding Sapphire, I enjoyed watching it, although it wasn't really my cup of tea. What made it interesting for me was that it is based on a true story. The movie touched upon a lot of interesting topics such as race, history, and sisterhood. However, the romance wasn't convincing to me. I couldn't feel the chemistry between the main lead actor O'Dowd and the older sister from the Sapphire. I have forgotten her name. It felt rushed and forced, and it was unnecessary. Overall, it was an alright movie, had some great songs which I really enjoyed. I'm really into thriller and sci-fi nowadays, so I naturally enjoyed watching I Am Mother. At first glance, it might look like your typical robot destroys humanity and takes the world narrative, but it's more than that. It's a very thought-provoking movie, and it made me relate to our world situation at the moment. Wars, global warming, rising crimes, pandemics. Human beings are the ones destroying the world, so I can understand Mother's goal in the movie. However, I don't agree with her actions. It might be a slow burner given that the movie was almost 2 hours long, and I wish they showed us a little more background story to Hilary Swank's character. Nevertheless, it was a good movie, it was superb acting and visually pleasing. The robot looked super convincing, lol. So, thank you. Hold on, it was a pleasure having you twice on the show. So, usually when it comes to selecting guests, I try to suggest movies that I think they'll like. Well, I think for some, I would show them the list that I have, and then they'll choose themselves which ones to do it with me on. So yeah, I'd say you're welcome, Hodan, that I introduced you to the Sapphires and I Am Mother. So with the Sapphires, like I pretty much right there with you, because yeah, it was an entertaining movie for what it is. Even though, like I said, it's cliche, like you kind of know what's going to happen. I'd say for me, yeah, the music, and with Chris O'Dowd, he was the highlight of the movie. And the older sister, I believe the character's name is Gail. I don't remember the actress's name. And with I Am Mother, yeah, I loved how, I would agree with you, that's very thought-provoking. And yes, it's very slow. I mean, it probably due because it's set primarily in one location and you have 2, 3 actors in the movie. So probably if it was like 90 minutes, I'd probably enjoy it more. But yeah, like it accomplished what it needed to do in the movie. And yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, the robot was super convincing, because if you check out the VFX episode on Corridor Crew, they had the director, he appeared there, where he talked about how they accomplished a visual look of Mother. Next up is Shadow. Hey Numphy, so I just wanted to say that I was totally unprepared with our episode, and man, now I know I have to be more prepared for it and have my notes ready. Haha, but I enjoyed it a lot, talking about the film and your trivia. It was a movie I haven't seen before, or I vaguely remember, so it was a nice rewatch. My movie suggestion, I would love it so much to do it with you, would be my favorite rom-com called While You Were Sleeping with Sandra Bullock. It's my go-to Christmas movie, and your girl still owns a VHS copy of it, if that interests you. Or even, what's love got to do with it? I feel like this movie doesn't get enough love, but I could be wrong. I love what you're doing. Thanks, Shadow. Well, Shadow, it's not wrong, like, for you to be unprepared. I mean, yes, please watch the movie beforehand, but I would say, yeah, you were good with the episode. And in terms of taking notes, I mean, if you want to do it, do so. I mean, for me, I have to, since I am running a show. I need to make sure I keep on track. But it depends on the person. So either make notes to remember or don't. It's up to you. And yeah, certainly enjoyed having you for the high fidelity episode. Even though there were some technical issues at the beginning, we got through it at the end of the day. And in terms of your suggestions, I have seen What's Love Got to Do with It. I find it's okay with that movie. I would need to rewatch it to know my feelings on it now. And with the Sandra Bullock one, I haven't seen it, but I will certainly check it out, and I'll get back to you soon. Next up is Corinne. Rediscovered Movies give the opportunity to its listeners to go back in time and get a full review on older movies. It's a concept I like a lot, and I think this season was able to win the heart of many. What I'd like to see in the future is reviews on movies that were on the top of the box office in X year. I want to hear about movies who won Oscars and Emmys back in the day and see if they aged well or not. With these movies, which won Best Cinematography, Best Soundtrack, or Best Actor back then, make it into Rediscovered Movies tier list today? Well, thank you, Corinne, and it was a pleasure to having you be a guest for I'm Your Man and The Long Kiss Goodnight, so check out those episodes if you haven't. And yeah, like I say, your suggestions are interesting, because I think with out of the films that I did so far on the podcast, there might have been 1 or 2 that were at the top of the box office, while the rest have not. And yeah, like I used to talk a lot about awards that some of the films either won or were nominated. I didn't do it that much this season. So yeah, that's something like I'll probably incorporate in the future. And yeah, that'll be interesting discussion to talk about, because usually when movies come out way back when, they've probably either been embraced well by the public at the time, but then fast forward to years or decades later, it doesn't get the same reception. So yeah, that'll be an interesting. Yeah, that's something I'll probably consider for the future. Thanks, Corinne. Last but not least, here is my dad. First, I was very impressed to see your Rediscovered Movies YouTube channel and the erudite and eloquent yet succinct manner in which you provide the essence in movies like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. in 30 seconds or less. That is no mean feat. How does one reduce more than an hour of movie into seconds? You really come out shining like a bright star. My reflection on Hollywood Shuffle is that the movie holds huge implications for our modern times in terms of the use of directing, acting, and representation to portray Black people in a certain lens. In the 1800s, there was this tradition of blackface minstrelsy, wherein a Black actor was not allowed to perform a Black role. Instead, a white actor performed that role wearing a blackface. This disconnect between reality and representation distorted the image of a Black person and also ensured that the Black actor was economically disenfranchised. Thus, it can be argued that the purpose of the system of blackface was to deprive Black actors of access to the economy of the entertainment industry. The vestiges of this fact exist today by relegating Black actors to the demeaning roles in order to justify low pay and consequently the economic disempowerment of Black performers. Thus, the purpose of the tropes, the stereotypes, and motifs as shown in the vignettes of Hollywood Shuffle confirm that these methods are intended to disempower and to unbalance the melanin as shown in my article to defend the culture's vote. Good luck with your Rediscovered Movies initiative. Zulu Matapo. Well, thank you, Dad. So let's go back to the beginning here. So thank you so much for mentioning the YouTube channel. So for those of you that are not aware of the YouTube channel, please subscribe, which you could find via the link tree. And I'll also post the link in the description. So yes, you mentioned one of the episode with the season finale, The Man from U.N.C.L.E. So yes, so I usually on the YouTube channel I post the previews that I posted on social media. So yeah, it's not easy to coming up with what clips to show to promote the episodes, but I'm glad you are enjoying that. And in terms of Hollywood Shuffle, so yeah, like I said, that movie is resonating back then and still is today, even though things have changed. I mean, we see more Black people or people of color, not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera as well too. So even though we're not quite there yet, there's still a long ways to go in terms of removing the stereotypes and showing people of color in a more positive light. And yeah, that movie Hollywood Shuffle, if you guys haven't seen it, please check it out. It's very worthwhile to watch. So, and thank you so much, Dad, for your comments on the podcast. I love that it resonates with you, and hopefully it resonates with the audience as well too. Alright, now I will share the top 5 most listened to episodes of season 2. Now, usually with this list, by the time the episode airs, you'll have one set of top 5 lists that I usually share. And then usually after that air date, the list tends to change. So, which happened in the first season? Because with season 1, by the time the Aftershow aired, the top 5 was Monsters, Idiocracy, Begin Again, Drive, and The Incredible Jessica James. And then currently, it has flipped. So, in that list is Drive, Monsters, Begin Again, Idiocracy, and The Incredible Jessica James. So, honestly, anything can happen between now and by the time season 3 airs. You never know. So, as of now, here is the top 5 episodes for season 2. Number 5, The Art of Self-Defense. Number 4, The Guest. Number 3, Fast Forward. Number 2, The Sapphires. And number 1, Beach Street. Congratulations to those films. You accomplished something in this list. So check those episodes on Anchor and wherever you get your podcasts. As mentioned, I recorded the video versions of the podcast, and those episodes will be available on the YouTube channel starting early 2023. Right now, I'm currently editing those episodes, so most of them will be video, while there's a few that will be in audio format only. So those will be available on the YouTube channel, which I'll post a link in the description, or you could also find it on the show's profile on Linktree. And with those videos, there'll be a talking head style, so pretty much you'll see my face and also the guest's face as well too, because honestly, with YouTube being very stingy with copyrighted materials, I just do not want to take that risk of adding video clips from the movie. So just look for that when the episodes become available on YouTube. So season 3, it is in the works. I already compiled a list of movies to cover. Now that list will most likely change. I don't know if it will change a little or if it will change a lot, but yes, it is coming. I don't have an exact air date, so follow the show on Twitter and Instagram for updates. Now that with season 2 is done, the show now is officially going to go on hiatus because for me, even though I love doing podcasting, I am an artist first, so I will be taking the time to focus on projects that I've been working on. Hopefully those come into fruition, hopefully in the coming months or in the coming years. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. So hopefully it won't be long with the hiatus. I'm aiming for the show to come back in 2024, but depending on what happens, it might take longer or it could be shorter. Again, I'm not sure yet, so, but I guarantee you there will be a 3rd season. And I would love to do either like an Instagram live or maybe a Twitter Spaces to connect with you with the fans in the future. So hopefully that can happen within either the coming weeks or months. So we'll have to wait and see. And so I do want to mention that the link for my dad's article will be available in the description, and also to the link for the Matt Damon's interview on Hot Ones that will also be available in the description. And also too, I made a watch list of all the films that were featured on the podcast on my Letterboxd profile, which will be available in the description of the podcast. And before I sign off for now, I just want to say that you could follow myself on Twitter, Instagram, and Linktree at Nomfanelo. And you could follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Linktree at RDMoviesPod. You can use the hashtag RDMoviesPod. And please too, answer the questions on Spotify. Let's just start dialogue. Let's talk about movies. And also too, like and share the podcast on your platform. Hopefully with that, it could get more discovered in the algorithm. And yes, subscribe to the YouTube channel, which you could find via the show's profile on Linktree or in the description of this podcast. So I want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in to not just this episode, but with this season and also the previous season of the podcast, whether you are a returning listener or are listening to it for the first time. I welcome everyone. So I want to say thank you guys so much, and until next time.